All right, everyone. Welcome into the Voice of College Football and our weekly Michigan live show that we typically just air over on the Wolverines channel here at the Voice of College Football. But hey, the GOAT retired today. We believe he retired today. He said it's final. So, simulcast on the main channel. Welcome in college football fans. And of course, it is technically National Signing Day as well. We got Dre on the line. Dre Artist, great to see you. Our half of our Michigan post-game hosting tandem here at the Voice of College Football, and Isaiah Hull, who joined us recently for a record and a lot of great Wolverine discussion. You can catch Isaiah's work at Wolverines Wire. Isaiah, how you doing today?
Doing all right. Yeah, day kicked off with a different kind of bang than I think anyone maybe thought as far as in the land of Michigan football. People were kind of waiting to see if any recruits ended up coming the way, and turned out that the GOAT retired. So completely upended the news cycle in a big way.
Yeah. So unless you guys want to question my producer skills, 500 rated player in the country, greatest of all time, I think we lead with Tom Brady. So Isaiah, I guess we will start with you just in regards to your thoughts about it. And of course, the connection to Michigan's why we're leading with that. Of course, a guy who was a 6th-round draft pick, but I think NFL fans who don't follow college football minimize Tom Brady's level of play and his accomplishments at the collegiate level because they just connect him as a 6th-round selection and minimize what he accomplished at Michigan.
And you forgot the one accolade, my unrequited best friend. Nonetheless, Tom Brady, I mean, he had a much better career at Michigan than people kind of think. They look at the fact that he was splitting time with Drew Henson, and it really was kind of more. I mean, maybe not quite to a little bit. Well, let me reverse that. It was probably a little bit more of splitting time than what we saw from Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy in 2021. But that's kind of essentially what you were getting in a way. I mean, he was a team captain. And so there's always these discussions that tend to take place from people who don't like Michigan very much about Tom Brady and saying, well, Michigan didn't even really want him. Now, the fans certainly were excited for Drew Henson, kind of in a similar way that they were excited for JJ McCarthy, right? But certainly Tom Brady had a better career at Michigan, had a bit more respect, even, I would say, than, say, Cade McNamara did. Obviously, some of the highlights were really the big ones were against Ohio State, and then the comeback victory over Alabama in I can't remember exactly which bowl it was, the Orange Bowl, I believe.
Orange Bowl. Yeah.
I knew it was in Florida, but I was trying to I get all of the Orange Bowl, Citrus Bowl, I get all of those completely mixed up. So I mean that was a pretty big deal, and a precursor of what was to come. And he's never lost his love for Michigan. He's come back and he's spoken to the team a couple of times, once in Brady Hoke's tenure, and then again in the Jim Harbaugh era in 2016 in week 3. But since he's been in the NFL, and then we know what kind of grinder he is, he hasn't necessarily had much to do with the program that much, but he still goes out and says, like, Michigan is what built me. Michigan is what made me. Because at one point he was 7th on the depth chart, and he really rose up, and that was, he said, a credit to the coaching at Michigan and not just kind of being given everything. And so I think he was kind of forged in Ann Arbor, and then he made his legacy at the NFL level.
Great. Yeah, your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, to echo a lot of Isaiah's points, it's weird because if you it's a tale of two very, very different careers, right? And I don't care how much of a fan you were of Tom Brady at Michigan, no one anticipated he was going to have the career he had in the NFL. And I distinctly remember actually when he visited Michigan under Harbaugh, Jim and his quirky ways, he threw out there, he said, Tom sure throws a good ball. I think they were playing catch or something before one of the games or something like that, and he was talking about how Tom could still rip it pretty good, and I think that was like back in 2015 or 16, and we know Tom's been playing an additional 6-7 seasons after that. So, you know, it's incredible. Testament to his career. I think he's been if not the most fierce competitor, one of the best competitors in all of sports, not just football. He's been a great ambassador of the league. He's had a Michael Jordan type effect on football, the way that Jordan had on basketball in terms of just dominance of the sport. In a way, especially in a team sport like football, almost becoming one of those special individuals where it's, it's Brady, right? Brady literally is the draw, maybe more than the Patriots are, or maybe more than the Bucks are. Very similar to like an NBA where a guy like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, it's like as an individual, it's probably a bigger draw than the actual team. I think Tom Brady, his career got so elevated to the point that he was himself, he was a draw. And I think the defining moment really, he was already to go before he went to Tampa Bay, but to, leave New England and go to Tampa Bay in his very first year and to win a Super Bowl, I thought that would have been the ultimate mic drop to retire then. But, he's a very hungry guy. He wanted to give it a couple more tries at it and fell a little short, but he's had an incredible career. And I'm glad he's a Wolverine. Absolutely.
Isaiah, you mentioned where Tom Brady stood on the depth chart. And we know of Tom Brady having this supreme confidence that he's the best, that regardless of the game situation, he can get it done. And I think some of us tend to think that came on after he started winning Super Bowls. But now that he's become so celebrated and there's been a lot more revisiting of history at Michigan, you find out that he had that same mentality at Michigan, that he was the best, he was going to win the job. If given the opportunity, nobody was going to be better than him.
Well, do you know, Mark, what he said? And not to be sorry to cut you off, Isaiah, but do you know, Mark, what Tom told Robert Kraft after he was drafted as a 6th-round pick? Robert Kraft, the owner, he goes up to him and he says, "Hi, I'm Tom Brady. You're really lucky you picked me." Or something.
Yeah, he said something like, "That's the best decision you've ever made."
Yeah, I mean, think about the cojones have on you as a 6th-round pick. Go to the owner and say that,
Well, yeah, I mean, he's come up from a lot of talent in Ann Arbor. Think about, and I know that Brian Griese wasn't exactly thought of as being a complete ball slinger out there, but he did help, at least on the offensive side, propel Michigan to a national championship. And Tom Brady was on that team, so he at least got to witness that. And then just to be, to climb up the depth chart and to be able to hold off a 5-star the way he did. I mean, a lot of people look at that 1999 season and say if Michigan wasn't dabbling with Drew Henson, then they probably win that game if Tom Brady's in for the entire game, because he was that good. But at the same time, I think that probably helped him a lot more down the road, right? Because when you have to try to battle a guy that is gunning for your job that everyone wants to see, I think more so than just having to rise up, because we've seen guys rise up depth charts, from time to time. I mean, even in Ann Arbor, Wilton Spate was not a guy who anyone thought was going to start going into that 2016 season, but he didn't turn into Tom Brady, right? I think it's a completely different thing when you have to rise up that depth chart, you get the position, and then the very next year, you find yourself in a battle with a guy that everyone in the country is excited to see what he's capable of. And certainly, I mean, you think back, I mean, just a couple years later, after Drew Henson went through the Major League Baseball experiment, when he decided to switch back over to football and play for the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, he was the thing in the NFL for a little while they were hoping that he was going to be able to take over for, I believe it was Quincy Carter at that time, and it didn't really happen. But at the same time, I think that really forged Tom Brady's confidence in a way to show himself, not only can I quarterback at a high level, I can overcome some of these really big obstacles that are in front of me. And certainly he goes to the Patriots. He has Drew Bledsoe ahead of him, and that didn't really phase him. And he once he took over, I mean, he never relented. And Drew Bledsoe, became a journeyman again after that. So, I mean, I think that's a testament to Tom's perseverance. And Dre, you mentioned the Tampa Bay thing. That's one place where Tom Brady has an accolade that most don't. Is everyone looked at how Jordan did in his 6, which were all under Phil Jackson in Chicago. It wasn't the same when he went to the Wizards, right? Whereas Tom Brady took his little walkabout, goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, wins the Super Bowl, makes it to the playoff 2 more times. Now, granted, this last year was almost by default given the Tampa Bay's record, but the NFC South, not exactly a domineering division. But still, the fact that he's a guy that people were still talking about, like, could he go to San Francisco? Could he go to Las Vegas? Mike Florio puts out a thing saying, maybe the Lions, even though everyone's pretty happy with Jared Goff at the moment. He's still someone who is coveted in the NFL, despite the fact that he is certainly starting to decline. And that speaks to his capability.
Yeah, I think, he's one of those guys where, and I even would say that guys like Peyton Manning didn't have this, or Dan Marino, or any other great quarterback. I think just him. He got to a point where, like, when Tom Brady was on your team, there was an immense expectation you were going to win a Super Bowl, and not just outwardly too, internally. Like, I felt like when Brady came to your team, right, any year on the Patriots, or definitely, when he went to Tampa Bay, everybody felt like, I have to bring my A game to practice, to the games. It's a different feeling, because that's the aura that he had about him. It's pure winning. And not only did he lead by, verbally talking his guys up, coaching them up, but also by his play, right? He just, if Tom Brady threw you a ball, you want to make sure that you caught it. Not just because it's your job, but you wanted to come through for him, right? He's one of those rare guys that, like, I compare it to, like, I think he's the only guy in sports I can compare him to, like Michael Jordan basketball, where you hear a lot of guys talk about Jordan in basketball, like his teammates. Yeah, he put fear in you. Like, I'm sure Tom put fear in some of his other guys from a respect standpoint, but you want to also come through for him, right? Because, like, that's what they brought out of you. And you saw Tampa Bay, yeah, they had a talented roster, right? A very talented defense. Mike Evans on offense. They brought Gronk with them. Fournette. They were talented on both sides of the ball. But there's a reason why they elevated from being a meddling outside playoff team under Jameis Winston to being a Super Bowl winner, right? It's a different feeling with a guy like that. So, and it's funny, you can go on looking years back, his first Super Bowl run in 2001 with the Patriots, and you hear, his teammates talk about him then. And as a 21, 22-year-old, he just had a confidence about him that you just don't see. For a guy who didn't really have a huge track record, a up and down career in college, and then also getting drafted, being a 6th round pick, barely being on a team. He just had a confidence about him. And it really is incredible. It's incredible, because actually you could say this, if you compare it to a guy like Michael Jordan still was a lottery pick. Tom Brady was 1 round for being, potentially, Mr. Irrelevant. You never know. So it really is incredible, his path. And I agree with you, Isaiah. I think, going through what he went through at Michigan and having to constantly prove himself, it was just, it made him who he was.
When you want to talk about confidence, I do want to chime in real quick on this. So I'm on the sidelines for games, taking photos, and that game, week 3 of 2016, when he came to the big house, I didn't even realize he was standing next to me, like literally right next to me. I was kneeling down, taking pictures. I stood up and bumped into him, and I was like, I'm sorry. And then I realized I just bumped into Tom Brady. A couple minutes later, Michigan's down 21-7. and he has to go, right? He can't stick around for the whole thing. I know he's got like a bye week, which is why he's around, but he still had to go after the first quarter. And someone that was like not in his entourage, but kind of hanging out with his entourage that was there, they're like, really want to go now? Like, the game's really in doubt, and Michigan's down by 14, and he just confidently said, like, you kidding me? Michigan's got this. They're gonna win by like 2 scores. And then he just walks away, goes up the tunnel, and he wasn't wrong. And it's like his confidence, like there was no doubt. And when he said that, I at that point was like, I don't think Michigan's going to win this game. I mean, Colorado had already shown it was a pretty good team. Yet on the sidelines, Tom Brady watching, there was not one moment where he didn't have faith that Michigan was going to come back and win that game. And that kind of speaks to just who he is.
I think you're on mute, Ray.
It's funny. I'd like to get your perspective on this. I think for the current starting quarterback for Michigan, he plays with and JJ McCarthy plays with a certain swagger, plays with a certain confidence. If there's anything that I do, I hope he has taken from Tom Brady, or maybe he's gotten, had a chance to talk to him every now, once, at least once, maybe, is to assert yourself, assert your dominance, and he has the leadership thing down pat. I think everybody respects JJ McCarthy on that team, but to take that next step, bringing that consistency and confidence every Saturday, it elevates your game as well as your teammates. And I think that's the next step for JJ McCarthy. Do you think that he can he can't be Tom Brady? I'm not saying that, but do you see some of those Tom Brady-esque traits potentially in a guy like JJ?
Well, that's his goal. I remember talking to him as a recruit, and one of the things he told me is his goal is to go to the NFL and have a better career than Tom Brady, however it ended up. That's his ultimate goal. So I mean, that's the guy he looks up to the most in the NFL, and he has a similar swagger. I mean, he's very similar. Like it's amazing just the way that he carries himself, and how while still being gracious and humble. It's kind of bizarre, but he has that same competitive edge. I mean, we all sat down after the Fiesta Bowl, and JJ McCarthy is one of the 3 players that is brought out, and that's his first loss as a starter at Michigan, mind you. I know a lot of my colleagues did not like this, but he answered one question and was kind of just incensed in general at kind of what happened, certainly with the 2 picks that ended up being 14 points for TCU. I could see why. He just got up right at the end of the question, literally the first question out of the gates, and went away. And a lot of people obviously were saying, like, man, that's not a good showing. But I think that actually shows you just how ill-equipped he is to dealing with losing, which is kind of in a way what you want from a guy like that. Now, you do want the leadership where you can stand and face the heat, but at the same time, you want to see a guy that's just, because it wasn't like he was crying or anything like you see people do when they lose big games like that.
No, he was hot.
Yeah, he was just mad.
Yeah.
And he had a brusqueness about his tone. I texted him on the way back from the stadium, and I'm like, hey, man, good. You showed a lot of heart out there today. I hope you're not beating yourself up too much over it. And he's like, we're coming for it all next year. It's like he's already laser focused on the next step. And he's got that same type of edge about him while still having a humility. There's not like he very much, there's been a couple of times that I've been around him. And I think another illustrative story was at Indiana. He goes, how he does his meditating thing. He decided to go and do it up in the stands for the Indiana game, well before the fans had arrived. He goes up in the stands and security won't let him down. They don't recognize him. He's not wearing a credential because he's on the team, right? Even though he's wearing like a team issued, jersey, and security wouldn't let him down. So me and a colleague go over there, and they just let him down right as we got over there. And we're like, what happened? And he's like, oh, I just didn't know who I was, and he wouldn't let me down and whatever. And I said to him, like, have you ever been here before to Memorial Stadium? And he's like, oh yeah, one other time. I was like, well, when would that have been? Because this is the first trip here since 2020. And he says to me like, oh, I came here as a recruit for a camp, and they said I wasn't big enough or good enough to play in the Big Ten. And I was like, oh, what does that mean for you? And he's like, that means we're gonna kill him today. And I know that's the type of thing that you're gonna hear from pretty much any athlete, but it's just, again, the demeanor. It wasn't like he was sitting at like completely straight face. He was also saying it with that same kind of smile and everything that you see in most of his press conferences. And but yet with there was no part of him that was lying, right? He had come in with a vendetta, and he fully intended on flexing that, and that would end up being his first game where he threw for over 300 yards. And I don't think that is that's a mistake. So I do think he has that competitive edge. He is a guy that people forget how young he is, because even though he played a bit in his freshman year, this was his first year really taking the reins instead of just coming in for a snap or two here and there. So I'm really curious to see how he evolves and how he grows, because usually you see quarterbacks take that big next step in when they get to be upperclassmen. So I'm very excited to see what he does in his third year coming up here.
Isaiah Dre, I need to jump off here in about 2 minutes. There are a couple things that I would love to have Isaiah address before, we certainly, Isaiah, want to respect your time. So depending on how much time you have, we can certainly finish the Tom Brady discussion. At some point, I would love for you to give us anything that you've got on the one commit for today, defensive lineman Cameron Brandt out of California. Then also Nicholas Harbor got away, and how much of a loss do you think that is? Do you really think that Michigan was right there in the running?
We'll start with Cameron Brandt. I don't have a lot to say about him necessarily. He's a kind of a late. Michigan had certainly been pursuing him. He visited within the last couple weeks, I believe. But he's a guy that I think is exactly what Michigan needs. He's a guy that maybe isn't going to play right away, but he's kind of growing still, and I think that going through a year or two of strength and conditioning will certainly help. But he's got that upside. He's a 3-star to most services. 24/7 Sports and the proprietary has him as a 4-star. I think that's the type of defensive tackle Michigan has historically done really well with. Guys that do kind of need to grow into their role in their position. And considering that they've had some losses at defensive tackle, while they still have some other guys that they're still kind of working in and working through, I think he'll be afforded a little bit of time to be able to do that. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do, and the fact that they were able to bring him in along with Brooks Barr, along with Trey Pierce. I think that that's a good haul. Michigan's starting to really kind of hone in on that defensive tackle position, where they haven't necessarily hadn't had that luck for a couple years. They still didn't really get a nose, and so he's not really that. He's kind of more of a 3-tech. So we'll see how he ends up growing into that position. Nicholas Harbor's an interesting one. Michigan certainly felt good earlier in the season. Michigan was probably the leader for Nicholas Harbor for the bulk of his recruitment, even though they weren't the ones that were getting talked about. But things kind of shifted along his recruitment, because you have to keep in mind that Michigan really saw him as an edge rusher. That's where they really kind of wanted him, but he doesn't really want to do that. He wants to stay as an offensive skill position player, wide receiver, tight end, probably more likely. He's more focused on track than he is on football. That's where he really wants to thrive. He wants to go and be in the Olympics and be that type of guy. He runs a 10.28 100-meter dash. So makes sense that he would want to keep that type of speed, even though his best position would be to bulk up and become an edge. He's not necessarily an elite route runner, but I think it's one of those things where it's a blow in some senses, because he's a guy that Michigan really wanted, but they wanted him at a different position than what he's going to probably end up being. Now, if South Carolina convinces him to be an edge, then it will probably feel a little bit worse. But Michigan didn't necessarily need to bring in a really fast tight end, and that isn't necessarily akin to, the Brock Bowers and, I mean, even Colston Loveland's of the world in terms of catching ability, route running ability, things of that nature. It's certainly a loss, because he's a freakish athlete type of guy that does not come around very often. But things certainly shifted to NIL became a much bigger priority because that was the thing for the longest time was, hey, his parents feature a pharmacist and someone who works at NASA. NIL is not in the cards for this kid. He does not care about it. Michigan's still getting its ducks in a row when it comes to NIL. And even though they announced the Learfield partnership today, I mean, I don't know how much that's going to move the needle per se. So I don't think that that ended up holding true for Harbor. I think he ended up being much more of an NIL type guy. I mean, he ended up hiring a marketing agency. He went to Oregon to visit. I mean, usually, at least in the last year, guys who are going to Oregon to visit almost always are doing so because they are hearing about their NIL pitch. So it's not, it's the law of the land now. So it is what it is, but Michigan's not in that sphere at the moment. And it's a loss, but I don't think it's like the biggest loss. It would have made their class look a bit better having a 5-star, but now they still never really cracked having anyone in that top 100, according to any of the recruiting services. So that part is a little bit of a barrier for Michigan, but certainly when you look back to 2018, their lowest rated class outside of 2015 in the Harbaugh era, that ended up turning out okay. So I think that as long as they can get similar development results, then everything will be fine.
I've got to scoot. Dre, have a good rest of the show. Isaiah, we appreciate you stopping by, and stay as long as you'd like. But we appreciate you stopping by, and you are always welcome, sir.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I can stay for another couple minutes, Dre. So let's continue to, let's say probably 5 more minutes. We can continue to hash some things out here.
Sure. I appreciate that, Isaiah. So, I gotta be honest, man. One of the things that myself as well as my co-host Des have been talking about really for the last going on 2 years has been like this speeding train that it seems that the program is trying to outrun in regards to maintaining the needed recruiting talent to sustain the success they've had. Right? Look, we all know that talent development is, if not 1A, 1B in terms of getting the most out of your program, but you also got to get the guys in too. You got to have the difference makers, right? You have to have a Georgia-esque, maybe like 10 of your 11 guys on the field. No, not necessarily, but you do have to have some, right? If you look at last year's team, or the year before last, guys like Dax Hill, for Jabo and Hudson, right? Having those true difference makers, just having 2 or 3 of them makes it really does make a huge impact. Now, they were able to get back to where they were last year with not those same caliber of guys, but still, to sustain a long-term success, you do need to have them. I gotta be honest, like I do worry about the lack of momentum that it seems like they're not capitalizing on from having 2 really great seasons. Being in front of these, recruits on a national stage, meeting in the playoffs, it just feels like, we're really have missed potential and opportunity to kind of get a few more of those 5 stars that could elevate us, to possibly win the playoff game and maybe a national title.
It's a little bit of, I mean, you're not wrong, but at the same time, I mean, it's you look back at this class, and of course, you're going to feel like this is really not capitalizing, and that's not wrong at all. That's absolutely accurate. However, I mean, they had a really good 2021 class, or 2022 class rather, before this 23 class. So where it was like a top 10 or around there type of group, they can afford to have some of these types of years, especially when you look at, for instance, the 2021 class where you had a guy like Rod Moore, who was a 3-star, who ends up being a starter pretty quickly. I've long said this about Jim Harbaugh. He's tended to do better with the guys who are your kind of middling 4 stars and your 3 stars, your high end 3 stars than otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at the track record, it's pretty accurate, right? Like, Aiden Hutchinson was in the hundreds ish. He was not thought of as being a 5-star type when he came to Michigan.
Yeah, sure.
David Ajabo, I believe, was had some split rankings between 3-star and 4-star.
Right.
So he's brought in some guys like that. And then you look even further back. I mean, Chase Winovich was a 4-star, but kind of like in the the 300s as far as his ranking, outplayed Rashawn Gary, who was the number 1 overall guy. Josh Metellus is still playing in the NFL.
Which is shocking. I gotta be honest, man. Like, he was a hard, what play I think about, what moment I think about when it comes to him. I don't know why. The Notre Dame.
Actually, the targeting call.
The targeting hit. I don't know why that play will always stick out to me about him. I don't know why.
I mean, could change the game real quick, like first drive. So that certainly put the game on its heels. I thought you were going to say the one that everyone else always thinks about, the Ohio State dropped interception.
Actually, I think about Brandon Watson more for that game, but
But yeah, I mean, he was a 2-star at the time that he committed, and a 3-star by the time that signing day wrapped up. So I think you need a little bit of a mixture, right? You need to be able to bring in some high-end guys. And so far, the 2024 class is starting out really well. You've got 5 commits at the moment, and 4 of them are 4-stars. Again, none of them are in the top 100. And it looks like they're probably going to get their 6th commitment on Thursday. Jacob Oden from Harper Woods. His dad used to play at Michigan as a walk-on, and his dad is the coach there at Harper Woods. I would have put it a crystal ball for him even before he got an offer if I still had one. But he's making his announcement tomorrow. I would be shocked if he doesn't pick Michigan. They've got all these other guys like that running back Tatum from Texas, and who's a high-end 4-star. They have guys that are on their radar that seem to kind of fit what they're trying to do, that are more of a high end. You can afford to have a class that, like they just had, where they just finished 19th according to On3. That's not exactly a bad class. Now, is it a great class? No, I think Clemson's best class in the Dabo Swinney era, their worst class rather, was ninth. It was probably like 17th or something like that. Sorry. But it's you can have your outliers, as long as you hit on some of those guys. Because I think the most illustrative for Michigan recruiting in the Jim Harbaugh era is 2017 to 2018. 2017 was a top 5 class. And then you look at all of those players. Donovan Peoples-Jones, while he was good, he did not play like a 5-star. He got outperformed by several of the wide receivers who were behind him.
Yeah.
Aubrey Solomon never panned out.
Yeah.
You go down that list and it's a who's who of who didn't pan out. 2018 is the opposite. So, all right, I got a cough here.
Yeah, go ahead. Help yourself, man. Help yourself. No, I definitely see your point with that, and absolutely, Jim's record is definitely getting the most out of, I wouldn't call them, not, lackluster players, but like you said, those middling guys where, they have some pretty good raw talent, but they definitely need a little bit more coaching up. And more to what I think Jim does really well is that he picks players more towards his system. And also character and the kind of guys that he just fit his program, as opposed to let me just go get the best guys across the country. Now, you're never going to turn down a great talent, but I think that's more or less what he goes for.
I will leave you with this. 3 of the best players that Jim Harbaugh, well, I know 2. I thought of 2 and said 3. So I might be over it here. But several of the best players that Jim Harbaugh has had have been guys who people have absolutely gone absolutely nuts and were super angry about taking when they committed to Michigan. Kwity Paye, who ended up being a 1st-round pick in the NFL, and Ronnie Bell, who's certainly not going to be a 1st-round pick, probably a day 3 pick in the NFL, but certainly was a very productive, very good college receiver. And I know I'm missing several others that have come and gone through the program like that. Guys like Josh Uche, who end up being a 2nd-rounder. David Ajabo was a huge hit. He was not a guy that was like a big nationally renowned guy. He's been very impressive on those types of guys. I mean, even Devin Bush had he was a low 4-star and high 3-star. I think he finished as a consensus 4-star, but it took until that last ranking before he got that type of rating. So he's been very good at more so with some of those types of guys. And it always seems like the guy that people complain about the most when they commit end up being pretty good. So I think it has to be a good mixture. You have to have some talent. You need your Dax Hills and types. Right now, JJ McCarthy I think he's the only 5-star they really have on the roster at the moment. And Will Johnson. And they certainly need to get more, but it's not. I think when you in the world now with the transfer portal and even with some guys coming back, because getting Blake Corum to come back is akin to getting a 5-star commitment for right now,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
That's like getting a guy that's like able to be a one and done essentially. I think that they're with the way the roster is currently constructed, it's fine. Certainly, it's until they get a quarterback for 2024, it's going to be a question. But the good news is if they don't get Jaden Davis, Dylan Raiola, who's a very big long shot, Van Buren, or any of those types of guys, transfer portal still exists. You can fix your roster right now. You can, in a school like Michigan, certainly, if JJ McCarthy moves on, they don't have a 2024 that's ready. They aren't really trusting Davis Warren to get the job done. They can go out there and say like, all right, who's in the transfer portal? There's going to be someone that's going to look for greener pastures and look at Michigan and have their eyes wide. So I think that's the good thing.
Well, we really appreciate your time, Isaiah. Thank you so much for your insight. And how about you, before you leave, refresh people where they can find you and more of your content?
You can find me at wolverineswire.usatoday.com for the written word, and Locked On Wolverines podcast, wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube, for me kind of mumbling and bumbling and all of this kind of stuff like you're seeing here today. So,
well, Isaiah, once again, thank you. Take care. Have a good rest of your evening.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
No problem. So that was Isaiah joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed his visit. Um, you know, it just goes back to, we want to sustain this success, guys, and I'm not gonna be on here much longer. That was the treat of the day. um, I don't know if you guys were expecting it or not, but I hope you enjoyed it. But that's just the main concern. When you are seemingly at the top, where it seems like Michigan is, in terms of the Big Ten. The question is, how do you stay there, right? And they've had some concerns, right? You look at the head coaching position, with Jim Harbaugh. Is he going to be here for a long haul or not? Right? We look at the athletic director, and Ward Manuel. A lot of people are not very happy with him. They want to change there, right? And how does that impact Jim staying here or not, right? And then you look at on the field, are they replenishing that barn? Are they continuing to bring in the talent necessary to sustain their success? We know they do a pretty good job of player development, and I thought Isaiah did a really good point, bringing up how they do really well, probably best with the three. Let's just call them 3-star type kids. But we all know at the end of the day, talent wins out, right? You can only coach up so much. I always give the analogy, hey, you can tell a kid, a kid a corner who runs a 4.5 tops. You only can coach him up so much how to guard a guy who runs a 4.26 or 4.3. You can get it only goes so far. So that's the only thing you kind of look at, right? You're like, okay, what are we doing to stay ahead of the curve? How are we? What are we doing today to get better? So let me take a look at some of your comments here. Let's see, Mike G. Dre, let's discuss the elephant in the room. What limits Michigan in regards to recruiting and taking next step to football dominance? Well, over the years, especially since Jim Harbaugh has been there, I mostly have looked at him, and his style. And I often have asked, especially when he was he wasn't doing the spread option offense yet, and I always ask, like, if you're a kid in today's college football, why would you want to play in that? Like a high end athlete, right? Why would you want to play in that? Do you really feel like you can showcase all of your skill set in an offense like that? outside of probably the running back and offensive line positions. If you're a quarterback, if you're a receiver, why would you want to come play for them? So I think stylistically, I think at times, potentially, even with them going more of a spread type offense, they still are predominantly running the football, right? We know how Jim wants to run his team. So, how appealing is that to today's high end athletes on the offensive side of football? Now, defensively, um, recruiting wise, I think it's, I think they're strong in one area and they have been spotty in another in terms of their defensive line and pass rushers. I think lately they've really showed a pretty good ability to develop those guys, right? Chase Winovich, Rashawn Gary to a certain point, Josh Uche, Quiddy Pay, David Ajabo, now Mike Morris. Um, I think they've started to build a pretty good track record, and maybe that is appealing to kids. If you're a pass rusher, linebackers, not so much. I mean, maybe outside of Devin Bush, is there really another high-end linebacker from Michigan that you could think of in the last 6, 7 years? I really can't. Secondary, it's kind of here or there. We'll see if Will Johnson can continue to ascend the way he looks like he is. I mean, just based on this year, he looks legitimate. Like that kid can possibly be a first round pick if he continues to improve and year to year. Remember, he was the true freshman this year, and I thought he was probably their best corner by the time we played the Fiesta Bowl. So we'll see where his career ends up, but it's just not quite as it's not a lot of sample size of really great players in those other positions. Let's think about the safety position. We brought up, Isaiah brought up Josh Metellus. He was a solid college player, but I think a lot of us are pretty surprised he's been in the NFL as long as he has. Because he was, I think he was terrible in the passing game, but he was a decent run support safety, right? So, I guess I think it's all over the board, but I think stylistically, if I had to pinpoint one thing that does stand out, I think that's what limits them the most in terms of appealing to players. Let's see. Thank you. Jim is Bo. Bo is Jim, and maybe that's not appealing to yeah. Maybe I think it's a catch-22 because I think that because Jim's style is unique compared to most programs nowadays, he's created a niche within the Big Ten where his teams are going to be better than and equipped to beat what 90% 95% of the teams in the Big Ten on most years. There'll probably be what two teams tops that have the talent and the physicality to match up with Michigan. Um, and that'll be what Ohio State, Penn State. Maybe if MSU continues to ascend under Mel Tucker, maybe there'll be MSU at one point in time again. But so it's really effective for winning the Big Ten, but on a national stage, you see it get exposed time after time after time after again. Think about, and it doesn't really matter caliber opponent. I remember we lost to what was it, a 7-5, 8-4 South Carolina team. And they in the what was that, the Outback Bowl or the Capital One Bowl now it's called. So that's part of like that whole bowl bad bowl record that Jim has. Is it preparation? Is it style? The style's not conducive to beat nationally other teams out of the Big Ten. That's something that I will hope that he really takes a good look at it and tries to see, what's going on the national stage. Why aren't we able to dominate or assert our will if against these other teams outside of our conference? See what else here. Yeah, GOJ. I have to agree with you on that. I was surprised the year where we got DPJ and um, Tariq Black and Nico Collins, and we had like these, you know, two to three, 4-star receivers. I'm like, wow, we got those kids here. What I mean, do they believe they're going to get to football? And I think I remember looking at DPJ's. I never forget looking at DPJ's recruiting profile, and he had like schools like Florida and a lot of Southern schools looking at him as well. And it's not that I thought those programs were better than Michigan, but I just thought stylistically, kid, are you really going to be able to show your talents here? Even though I love that you are here. Yeah, no, I'm with you, Jay. In general, I don't think they will with this kind of style. Why would you? If you're a receiver, you want to get the football. Throw me the football. When I'm watching you on Saturdays and I'm watching you, the ratio of run versus pass was it 35 carries to 15 attempts in the passing game. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. So no, I do think that's like the catch-22 of their style. Now, they should be able to compensate with that by getting high-end running back talent and high-end offensive lineman talent, right? And that's like the biggest thing I look for now. Like, what kind of a running backs are we bringing here, right? I mean, look what we're able to do with kids like Blake Corum, who I believe was a low-end 4-star kid, and Donovan Edwards, who was 4-star, 5-star-ish. He wasn't a legitimate 5-star, but very high-end talent. Like, can we get those 5-star running backs now? Imagine we can get more 5-star offensive linemen with our type of program. What could we do? So we have the strength. Can we find ways to capitalize on that strength and get even more high-end talent there? Maybe that can help us balance it out where we're not quite as good in terms of skill positions on the outside. NIL is sadly ruining college football. I think lack of NIL regulation is ruining college football. I have no problems with kids getting paid. It's one of those things where I know that there are some people who have the thought process that, look, a full ride scholarship, not having to worry about student debt when you get out of college, that's money in itself. And I understand that, but for for like the likeness that some of these kids have, and the amount of money and attention their play brings to university, I do think it's fair for that kid to feel some kind of compensation for that. Think about Blake Corum and what he meant to the university last year. No, I have no problem with Blake Corum getting his money. And I know he's an outlier, he's a star, but in general, I don't have a problem with kids getting paid, but I do believe there has to be some kind of regulation, right? It's getting out of hand with the deals that some of these kids who haven't taken one snap, uh, they are getting, right? And it's allowing schools to um, capitalize and get guys they probably normally would get, right? Got teams like schools like Texas A&M having a huge class that they were able to have. Now, ironically, they've lost a lot of those guys because once those guys got there, they saw that their program is a dumpster fire right now. But still, it's undoubtedly having a huge impact in the recruiting area. And Mike G, I'm glad you brought this up. Mike Carr said he doesn't care about stars. He wants a kid that competes. Maybe that's where the portal comes to play. K9 was, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. And I remember hearing Mike Hart say that, and I'm cool with that. But just make sure you're not excluding the 5-star kids just because they are a 5-star and assume they don't want to compete, right? Because I want the best of both worlds, Mike. If we can find a kid who wants to compete and he's a 5-star talent, bring him on. Bring them on, right? And so that's the main thing. Like, it'll be great if we're able to get some of those kids here, right? Let's see. Jason M. Kids aren't going to choose a school now based on being able to connect to a staff and what the university offers versus money and NIL deals being offered immediately. I think in general, there's probably some truth to that. I think it all goes based on that kid's particular background and values, right? Like, because sometimes you can't blame some of these kids based on their situation at home for taking the money. I mean, think about, if you're a kid that comes from a household that's, not doing well financially, and that's opposed to, for previous generations, you had to wait till you got to the professional level, right? And that was if you got to the professional level to be able to impact your family's life. in your life, right? But if you want those generational talents, 5-star kids, and at the age of 17, 18, you're able to make $1 million in a year and change your family's life, or at least, help out significantly. Um, you're going to do that. So, um, uh, I think it's based on your situation, because there are some kids who do have at home family values, and do have a situation where it's like, nope, no, the money will come. We're fine. You go to the school for this particular reason because you connect there. So I think there's a little bit of truth in both, but I don't think every high-end kid only goes for the money. And I'm not saying you're saying that, Jason, but it's definitely has made a big impact. Okay, you said I don't blame the kids. I blame college football. Yeah, absolutely. Right. The kids, I mean, look, I think all of us, if we're at the age of 17, 18, someone said, hey, I give you $1 million, come play for me. We're probably taking it. We're probably taking it. Yeah, sign me up. Like I've been a Michigan fan my whole life, and I played football in high school. Wasn't good enough to play at a Division 1 level, but my dream was to play for the University of Michigan. I have a picture of myself at 3 years old, being in a miniature Michigan football uniform that I'll share with you guys one day. And that was my dream, to run out there and touch that flag before the game and all that, and wear the winged helmet. But if a school came to me and said, hey, I give you $1 million to come play, for me, I may would have took that. Um, just saying. Oh, blank thing. That's not fair. That's funny though. Let's see. I'll show you guys this. Mark Hart would pass on Bo Jackson with the attitude he has for high school running backs. Um, yeah, I would hope that's not the case. I like where Mike's coming from. Can you understand what Mike's background is, right? And when Mike wasn't a highly rated recruit coming out of high school, he was what, undersized. What is he? 5'6", 5'7", 5'7" tops, right? And he had to work and earn his way, and he made an impact very early in his career. But no one saw he was going to be the guy he was. He was a worker, and he identifies with guys like that. So I definitely understand wanting similar kids, but just saying don't just shut them off because they're high caliber and they may have a little bit of arrogance to them. Sometimes that could be a good thing. It always go back to a healthy balance. So hopefully Mike's not just discarding those tapes when he sees 5-star talent. No, still bring him in and fill him out. Let's see what the kid's personality is like. If he can deal with some competition, sign him up. Sign him up. Um, let's see. Yeah, 6, 7 figures in college is crazy. But you do worry about those kids and their money management. That's another thing. I mean, think about that. This is a whole other topic, but there are a lot of professional athletes go broke and struggle with making money in their early 20s. Not making money, excuse me, managing their money in their early 20s. Imagine that. It's crazy. I do kind of wonder what are these schools doing to kind of help these kids adjust to that different type of lifestyle. Let's see. I'm sure I didn't miss anybody new here. I don't want to keep using the same people. I appreciate every one of you that are participating. Stan, I'm not worried about football recruiting. 23 was underwhelming, but could turn out to be an anomaly. NIL is slow, but progressing at UM. Jim is still here as of now. And Ono is on his side. Just keep winning. I'm with you. And I definitely believe that they have a legitimate chance to win the Big Ten for the third time this year. They definitely have the most talent returning on paper, probably out of any team in the conference. And if not, yeah, probably the most continuity, especially in terms of their top end talented guys. So they have an incredible opportunity to win the Big Ten 3 years in a row and get to the college football playoff 3 years in a row. That will be incredible, right? You just worry about who's next in line, right? And I think the main thing, Stan, for me is it's not that I believe that 23's recruiting class is a sample of more to come in terms of more underwhelming classes. It's just I feel like we're it's a potential lost opportunity, right? Like we're on a national stage. You have these kids across the country seeing the big block M, you know, on a national stage. Can we please find a way to get some of those kids here that we may not have been able to before, we turned the corner. That's more or less what I worry about. It's like, man, did we miss an opportunity here to maybe elevate the program? You know? Great. Sharon Moore is a master motivator. I think he can handle the full-time OC role. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I believe he can. See, what what's interesting about the OC role on a hardball? It's you always wonder who's really calling the shots. Now, like most coordinators across the country, right, have to get clearance from the head coach. It's really rare, if at all, that a coordinator can really call his own shots and the head coach doesn't have to sign off on, it, especially the game plan. So when you watch Michigan, it really no matter who the coordinator has been, you really have always gotten that's Jim Harbaugh's flavor. That's his style, right? Putting in. I find it very hard to believe that putting in a converted linebacker on a goal line situation who's had 10 carries in the season, as opposed to Donovan Edwards for what fullback dive was it? That just seems more like Jim style, right? More than Sharon Moore style. So it's always interesting, really, no matter who's OC, how much freedom do they really have to implement some of their ideas in the way they want to, but within the framework of what the coach wants. And that's the hard thing when it comes to Jim, right? Because it always feels like he has a heavy influence on the play calling and definitely the style of the offense. And that's where it's like, yeah, I mean, I agree Sharon could be a master motivator, but how much can Sharon do that goes beyond the scope of how Jim likes to run the team on offense? And sometimes I wish Jim would be a little bit more flexible and let guys try to take the offense different ways, especially earlier in the season where you can experiment a little bit more because your quality of opponent is just not nowhere near your level. So you can take a few more chances, right? And I feel like when you watch this team, no matter who they play the exact same way, same approach all the time. Let's see what else. Okay. Anything else I want to head on, guys, before we wrap? Uh, okay. I think that's pretty good. So yeah, it's ironic, guys. I know you guys all saw the news. Before I wrap, I bring this up. Uh, you know, Jim Harbaugh had a second meeting with the owner of the Broncos. Now, I think it's come out that what the Broncos are trying to acquire or have acquired Sean Payton from the Saints because they had to work out a trade because the Saints had Sean Payton's rights. So Denver's out for Jim, and but it was just ironic, it just like apparently we thought this all was behind us, and he had a second meeting. What's the point of the second meeting? See that those are those little things where it's like, why can't we ever put things to bed with Jim Harbaugh? It's always a never-ending uh cycle of iffiness, and it's very exhausting. It's very exhausting. Is the juice worth the squeeze? I gotta be honest, guys. Sometimes it depends on the day on my answer with that. Um, but and I also think that this will never go away when it comes to him. I really think he wants to get back to NFL. I really do. I believe, but at the same time, I believe he does love it here. He loves being a coach from Michigan, but it's just like anything else in life for anybody. Like you can want different things at the same time, and I don't know. I guess time will tell. I hate the back and forth. I really do. I think it slows recruiting down potentially. I think it slows the overall momentum of the program. It creates instability. But you know, I guess the saving grace right now is that we're winning. Especially in terms of the Big Ten. and it's hard not to enjoy the ride, albeit a shaky one at times, right? Especially at the end. So with that, I just want to just thank you guys once again for joining the show. Please hit the like button on your way out. It's been a pleasure this evening, and we'll see you again next week. Peace.